The topic that I've talked about the most this past week has been whether or not you should own a home or whether you should rent a home, right? And I think what I'm noticing is that generally I hear older generations speak about home ownership and how it's better because you're gaining equity, and how if you're renting, you're throwing away money, is what they say. And I think that's untrue. And I think that that depends on a number of factors that I don't think they consider. Because, for example, a lot of older generations, they bought homes back when homes were lower in price, right? Generally predating 2008 when we had the big housing market crash, or even earlier on when they had homes back in like the 90s, that sort of thing. So they're looking at it as like, okay, well, hey, now I'm here at this point in life. I've gained equity in the house because obviously houses has gone up astronomically in price. Interest rates are crazy right now, a lot of varying factors. But I don't think that they speak for our situation as being younger. And what I mean by that is because in some situations, it's not the best idea to own a home because obviously interest rates are higher. The house prices are more expensive. And then you also have to factor in maintenance. You have to factor in your property tax, those sort of things. And when they talk about the equity that comes into play with homeownership, I don't think they consider those other factors because if you look at it, for example, here in Alabama, I think I saw that the average annual increase in value for a home is about 2.1%, right? So that 2.1%, factor in your mortgage, factor in if you're doing FHA loans, you have PMI, factor in the property tax, which in a lot of areas, because house prices are going up, property taxes are increasing, right? Okay, and then you got to factor in the higher interest rates, which is money that you're just giving to the bank that you're never going to see back. When you add in all those elements and you look at the amount that your house is appreciating in value each year, it would take decades for you to actually see some type of benefit from the equity that you would gain in your home. And then even then, it's not necessarily that it's the best of the best situation. And what I mean by that is, in order to access that equity that you do get in your home, you have to either A, sell the home, or B, you have to take out some type of loan towards the equity, right? And then when you do that, what does that do? Generally, it comes with an additional interest rate, which is additional money that you have to pay to the bank, right? So you have to give the banks even more money just to access the money that you have in equity in your home. And then again, let's say that you do wait 10, let's say 10 to maybe even 25-ish years, right? So most likely you're probably at a point with a typical conventional 30-year mortgage where you've paid off majority of the home. That still doesn't take into effect the closing costs that you had to pay on the home, which is generally anywhere between 3.5 and 20% depending on the type of loan that you get. Okay, and then also too, you have to look into any sort of titling fees that go in it. And the thing that I think they miss is in most situations, it's not going to be a case where you're going to come out on top with owning that home. Again, if you're in a situation where you can maybe double or even triple up on payments, you can probably cut out the amount of interest that you'd have to pay on that house over the course of the loan. So that could be a benefit. But then even then, that's still money that you have to put in up front to cash out later on in the future. And that's if your home's value actually reaches that point where it would be beneficial. So I think that's something that they don't consider because a lot of those in the older generation, again, they bought their homes earlier on. So then they're currently benefiting from the major boom that happened with the housing prices. I bought my first home at 21 years old because I was always taught that buying a home is better than renting. I did start out by renting at 19, and then when I turned 21, I was in a position where I could buy my first home. The house that I bought was $114,000. It was new construction. And with that house, I do think that that was a good setup because the interest rate was super low on that house. I bought it in 2016, so therefore the housing prices weren't that crazy, right? And then I made a mistake and I sold the house at the beginning of 2020. And no one could have predicted what was going to happen in 2020. So I'm not beating myself up because I didn't know or I didn't read the market well or anything like that. But I was in a situation where I made a decision that I think I should have thought more about. But with that decision I made, I sold the house. I sold the house for like 134,000, right? And at that time, I think I only owed 105 on it after owning it for what, 2016. Not eat well. I consider four, let's just say 4 years. Okay, let's say 4 years. Not fully 4 years, but we'll say 4 years. I cashed out on it and sold it for 134,000. Right. As of today, in 2025, that house is worth $265,000. And so, yeah, in that situation, it's crazy because obviously the whole situation in 2020 happened. House prices went crazy. So therefore, that was one of those situations where like, dang, you hit the jackpot. So if I would have still owned that home right now to this day, I probably would have owed less than 100,000 on the home, and I would have had easily almost close to $200,000 in equity that I could have used. So I feel like in that situation, it's kind of beneficial, particularly stating interest rates were lower, so the payments on the house were a lot less. So it could have worked out and it would have been a better scenario. Keep in mind, this was a house purchased in 2016. Imagine if I would have bought the house pre 2008, it wouldn't even been a better deal. But see, I think this is the issue though, because a lot of older generations, they purchased their homes earlier on. So therefore, they're getting a really good benefit because of the fact that house prices went crazy. But the thing is, in our current setup, as those who are trying to buy homes, especially Gen Z, they don't really have that luxury because housing prices are pretty much at an all time high right now. So the growth rate of the value of owning a home is a lot lower. And so, therefore, it may take years if they ever even see some type of benefit from the equity that they would get in the home. And then again, that's still not factoring in the other aspects of maintenance and the interest that you're paying into the home and the PMI if you have an FHA loan and the property tax. It's not factoring those things. So I think that when I hear a lot of older generations state that home ownership is the best way to go, I always tell people that ask me for my opinion, it depends. It depends. Now, yes, I bought another home. Obviously things aren't as good as it was for the home that I purchased in 2016, but I had reasons for doing what I'm doing, and it works with my overall plan and stuff, which is why I did it. But the thing is, I think that if you're considering whether to buy a home or to rent, you need to think about what your long term objectives are in order to determine if that's the best move for you. But what frustrates me is when I hear a lot of older generations state that, oh, you need to buy a home and renting is throwing away money. You guys, if you experience that, hit them with the facts. Hit them with the financial facts, because a lot of times I see them going based on their experiences, and I'm like, your experience does not speak for everyone, and they don't consider everyone, and they don't consider that, hey, when you were buying a house, dude, I was a kid. Like, I was a kid when you were buying a house. So for you to say that, oh, this is the best move because at your era in time, housing prices were a lot lower, I think that's just an unfair assessment. So that leads me to another topic. Throughout the years, what I've done is I've tried to analyze people that are around me. I do have some friends that are older than me, and I am always interested in listening to those who are older than me because I realize that sometimes their experiences are of benefit. And I think that we can learn from a lot of the things that they've done. So I find it important to speak to those who are older than me. But one of the things that I noticed that people do as they get older that I'm still kind of fuzzy brained about is how they change and how they shift. I notice that when people get older, they tend to get set in a certain mindset. And despite all the new advances and things that take place, it's like they can't see anything outside of what they believe. And that is kind of interesting to me because I notice in the beginning when they're younger, they generally are very open minded, but then they just become closed off to new things. And that's something that I definitely want to avoid in my life and the things that I'm doing. But it makes me curious to why. I don't know the psychology behind it. I don't think I've done enough research to really understand the psychology behind it. But I am curious to why is it that when you tend to get in the older ages, you tend to get fixated in a certain mindset or a certain way of doing things, and no one can change your mind about it. I mean, I get it if it works, but then even then, I think it's important that if you find a more efficient way to do something, you should be open to it or open to different ideologies and that sort of thing. But you generally don't catch that from them. You get them in a state where they have a certain opinion about something and you can't change it despite all the amplitudes of evidence that come out. And what I noticed too is some of them have the mindset of this is how it is, this is how it would always be, you can't change it. And I think that's complete BS. Things can always be improved upon. It can always be improved upon. So I don't think that that's true at all. So it does. It makes me wonder, and I continue to look at those who are older than me, and I'm like, okay, what point did you decide that this is how it's going to be for you, and that no one could ever change that? So far as an update on where things are going with the music, the new song did release on its release date. So far, it's doing pretty well. Right now, I got most of my ad creatives done that are running through Meta Ads. Another thing that I did is I submitted into a few playlists and we got accepted on all of the playlists that we submitted in through. So that's a good thing. That's going to help us out as well. One of the things that I have to work on at this point is I have a complete list of short form content that I'm going to be rolling out with this song. I just have to work on shooting it. It's just a lot of tedious shooting that needs to take place. And I have like 25 videos to do. So that's something that I'm going to start working on today. Another good thing that happened is the one song that I released in March, part of my EP release, I'm a Threat, reached 8,000 streams, which is absolutely huge. I know in comparison with some people, it's probably not that big of a deal, but to me, it's a big deal. That's the first song that I've ever had to hit 8,000 streams. So I think that's absolutely great. And I'm looking forward to the other songs doing well also. And we're just going to keep moving forward. I appreciate you guys for watching and hope you consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.